I snooped on the CEO's email account and got myself unfired. A couple years out of college, I worked as an analyst at a pretty small private equity firm. The CEO was one of the biggest arseholes I've ever met. He was fairly young in his 40s, a multimillionaire, and the type of guy driven solely by money and zero business ethics. He'd do anything to get the upper hand in a deal regardless of who it screws over. Contractors, employees. I even saw him seriously screw over a longtime family friend of his without any remorse. Anyway, aside from the analyst role, as it was really small business, only about 20 people in the office and then a bunch of people working remote, I also happened to be one of the only semi-technology literate people in the company. So like many of my generation, I became a de facto millennial office computer guy too. Despite my lack of qualifications, I got put in charge of handling pretty much anything minor tech related. Setting up servers, fixing laptop issues, answering how do I convert this to PDF questions, even basic network security. They thought I was some sort of computer genius, but really, I was mostly winging it, Googling pretty much everything. But eventually, I got legitimately pretty good at all the tech stuff. They gave me bigger tasks like planning all the computer systems for all their own businesses and supervising installs. I didn't get paid extra for any of this, mind you. After a couple years of some serious BS working there, I was pretty worn out. I wasn't progressing. I hated working for Captain Meanie Poop. He treated everyone like poo. I was pulling 12 to 14 hour days with no overtime or performance bonus. And they weren't even paying me nearly what they should have. I also hated being the tech guy and was depressed as heck living in a cubicle. So I decided I full on had enough of the 9 to 8 life working for buttholes. And I would start my own consulting business working for myself. However, instead of quitting right away, I figured it would be smart to first build up my client's base on the side while I was still getting a steady paycheck. So that's what I did. I launched my company and landed my first clients. As the workload increased, I slowly started spending more and more time on my side business while at my office job. At first, I was pretty low-key about it, but eventually it became blatant as it was a super small company. I was the only one who knew how to do a lot of important tasks and operate some key internal systems. It was pretty easy for me to tell my boss a project was taking a whole week to complete that I actually finished in 10 minutes. Pretty soon, I was spending 80% of my day working on my own stuff in the office. I'd even take calls for my side business clients at my desk. The rest of the time, I was actually freaking around on Reddit or something. Of course, we had systems in place to monitor network activity, but I was the person in charge of monitoring it. This continued for a while as my own business ramped up. I cared less and less about my office job, and since I hated waking up early, I began rolling into work late. At first, it was only 30 minutes or so. Then it progressed to about an hour. When my boss didn't reprimand me, it became clear how much they needed me there. I took full advantage of this. Before long, I was arriving around noon, working for a couple hours, then heading home. My coworkers weren't happy, but I helped them with all of their tech problems, and they hated the company too, so they kept their mouths shut about it. My boss eventually said something to me about all of it at one point, but I just came in on time the next few days and then went back to coming in whenever I wanted. After more than 2 months of coming in 4 to 5 hours late and working on my side businesses in full view of my butthole boss, I couldn't believe I wasn't fired yet. I deserved it and felt it was inevitable. On a hunch, I decided to do a little investigative work as I was the tech guy. I also had full access to the company email server. So I logged into the CEO's personal email account and searched for my name. Lo and behold, there was a recent email thread between him, my direct boss, and some other team members with my name in the subject line. Obviously, I opened it. They're discussing my recent performance issues. The last email in the chain basically said, if nobody has any objections, I will be terminating him at the end of the week, 2 days from then. I wasn't surprised, but I decided there was no way I wasn't going to let these buttholes fire me. Although I didn't give a crap about that job. I didn't want to have a termination in my work history. I also wanted to keep getting paid for a while longer. Of course, I couldn't let him know I actually knew I was getting canned. So I formulated a plan to perform a little inception reverse psychology to mind screw on the CEO. The next day, one day before they planned to fire me, I requested a meeting with him to discuss my current performance. In that meeting, I sat down and he asked me what I wanted to talk about. So I told him, look, I know I've been a crappy employee lately. I'm sure you've noticed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been kind of getting the feeling that you guys are planning to let me go soon. When I said that, the shocked look on his face was priceless. He must have thought I was psychic to work that out on my own the day before that was going to happen. I remember him just saying something like, I continued to sat there flabbergasted. So I'll be honest with you, my heart isn't in this job anymore. As you know, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, which I'm sure you can relate to. I want to start my own company. However, as you're aware, I have a lot of responsibilities here nobody else can do. I then proceeded to list all the things I did and projects I was working on. I could see it on his face when the realization sunk in of how screwed he'd be if I left suddenly. So here's what I propose. You don't fire me. I don't quit. I keep working here for a month. Finish my current projects, and train whoever you want on everything I'm in charge of. After a month is up, I'll continue to come in once a week until it's complete. After that, if you still need me, you can pay me on an hourly project-by-project basis. I intentionally mentioned the possibility of me quitting so he could feel like he won the negotiation, even though I technically had him by the balls. He continued to think for a minute. Then he said something along the lines of, okay, you have a deal. So, not only did I get myself unfired, I actually turned the company into a paying client. During that month, I continued doing pretty much whatever I wanted since I had an expiration date while training my replacement as promised. After a month was up, they hit me up regularly for remote task work. I charged them triple what I was earning while working there, and barely had to deal with the CEO. My client base was big enough I dropped them for good. After all that, the CEO still calls me up for advice, questions nearly 3 years later. These days, I just blow him off by saying, sorry, I'm too busy. I think he was pretty diabolical, and I honestly wouldn't think that ahead like he did. Like he flipped that. He reversed that. As I said before, he, in a different thing, he Missy Ellioted it. What if it was, like he said, it was just like really easy things to do technical wise? Like they didn't really think of unplugging something and plugging it back in, and that's just like all he kind of did. And yeah, and then like just Googling something, man, people are so manipulated easily. That reminds me of like when my mom thinks the internet is broken, and I feel like just really smart by restarting the modem and like just turning it off and turning it back on and waiting for it to turn back on again. And she acts like it's such a big deal and I'm so smart and I should be in like some career that has to do with computers. Ethically, I don't think that was right on his end, but at the same time, life isn't fair and right, so he just, played life as it goes. But there's a comment that says, so, you're a major scumbag stealing from the company that pays you, and you're getting even with your butthole boss, because everyone's boss is a butthole, is just by hacking into his email and asking for another month of work. I'm not really that bothered because I doubt any of this happened, but work is a privilege. Gross behavior. I think that's kind of one-sided because like just the statement of work is a privilege itself. Like, are you going to say that to a stripper or prostitute? Like a drug dealer? That's work too. I was curious about this too. And so someone asked, how do you even start a consulting business? And he said, master skill. Find companies who need that skill. Tell them you're a consultant and we'll teach them the skill in exchange for money. If that's the case, I feel like I could be a consultant on how to be stupid and reference things incorrectly and mispronounce things all the time. I would be a freaking professional. I personally don't think I would have the conscience to do this because it would just haunt me. And even though if someone's like really bad to me, I couldn't do it because, I'm an angel, but it just like sounds like a whole episode of Seinfeld to me. Like they just introduced a new character who is an unethical office guy, but go for him. I do have to admit there is something similar I've done in college where like I would take an online course and during the exam I would just Google all the questions and ace the exam. I remember I would be so good at Googling my exams that a teacher called me and be like, you got the highest score in the class. Like, how do you do it? And I'd be like, wow, it's just, a lot of memorization. And she would go over the questions and answers with me and I just started to panic right there. But I pulled it off because, I'm graduated now. It was science, actually. There was science and math that I did so good at because of Google, because people would have like Quizlets of all of the answers. Thank you, Quizlet.